Remember, the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot.
Okay, stop, cut. By the time we go live on this, we're going to be 2 weeks out of date. We can't have out of date stuff on CFZ video.
It was only a wish fulfillment fancy of John's anyway.
What are we going to do now then?
We got Charlotte dressed as a Viking!
Greetings, O mighty warrior.
Hello, Charlotte.
Who is our mysterious visitor? Why is Charlotte dressed as a Viking? Well, to the answers to all those and a lot more questions, you're just going to have to watch the rest of this episode of On the Track.
On the 22nd of October, during the United States Grand Prix in Austin, Texas, there was a mysterious flying visitor.
Various people watching the race on television reported seeing the shadow of what appeared to be a gigantic bird flying over the crowd. The trouble is that as far as we know, nobody who was actually there reported seeing it, but there on the television coverage is unmistakably something which appears to be avian in nature. Various people have claimed that it is a Native American mythological creature called a Thunderbird, yet more people have referred to it as being a California Condor.
You mean a giant-ass bird?
Charlotte Emily Phillipson, what have I told you about using foul language? You never hear me using words like that. And don't snigger, it's not ladylike. So yes, I suppose the California Condor could be described as a giant-ass bird. But there is one big problem for the people who believe that it is one of these magnificent birds that's responsible for the shadow over the Grand Prix track the other week. There aren't any condors in Texas.
Tell me about the California Condor.
California Condor numbers have been in a long-term decline. Throughout sort of most of the 18th, 19th, early 20th century, they were being killed by poachers, they were taken from museum specimens, egg collecting happened, a lot of lead poisoning and DDT poisoning in particular, and this ended up just obliterating the population until eventually only about 20 condors actually were left. Now, one of the funniest individual circumstances that occurred to reduce the Californian condors' numbers and their distribution was when Johnny Cash took his nephew out fishing, I think in the late 50s, and ended up setting fire somehow to his pickup truck, which then got out of control and burnt down one of the forests that the Californian condors ended up roosting sort of around. And that led to the 50 individuals that were there just disappearing and then having to set up shop in a totally new area. So no one's really sure what happened there, but Johnny Cash ended up paying about sort of $80,000, I think, back to the US government. But after they finally managed to capture all 22 condors, they began to actually breed them with the intention of creating 2 populations with at least 100 individuals. And this took a fair while to get going, but was eventually successful. And in the early 90s, reintroduction programs began, and even to now, those the original adults are still there, still breeding, and the population is beginning to increase. I can't remember exactly how many it is now, but it's looking sort of towards coming up to about 800, 900, which is quite a lot. I think a couple of years ago there was a crucial milestone when more condors were born in the wild than died. So that means that now they're beginning to sustain themselves without needing extra releases from captivity, which is fantastic news.
Isn't there a problem with an entire species being descended from so few individuals?
You can see large problems with populations like this that have relatively quickly expanded from very few individuals. The gene pool is relatively tiny. So from as a population geneticist, what we call this is effective population size, which very roughly is the minimum number of individuals needed to undergo sort of genetic drift and mutation as fast as the current population. So in this population, because there were so few individuals, the effective population size is actually tiny because so many of these individuals share genes. There'll be siblings or sort of very close cousin matings ending up with sort of actually these 20 individuals having a massively disproportionate result in the 800 animals that exist now. The problem is, of course, is that there was no choice, and generally, although in a ideal situation we would want more genetic diversity, where there's only 22 animals, that's the hand we've been given.
That basically deals with the condor, but what about the cryptozoological thunderbird, the living embodiment of the Native American legends? I decided to telephone my old friend Nick Redfern, who's one of the best researchers I know in the subject of unidentified flying or feathered objects.
The Thunderbird phenomenon is one that I've actually investigated quite extensively over here in the United States, and for people who don't know, it's this sort of immense, gigantic, usually brightly feathered bird that features extensively in Native American lore and legend. And they're called Thunderbirds because the flapping of their wings supposedly sounded just like claps of thunder. And they were described as anywhere from having wingspans of 20 feet upwards, which of course is incredible, for the average bird. Now, of course, most people relegate the tales of the Thunderbirds to just myth and folklore and so on. But I actually have a number of cases on record where people saw what, if the stories are true, can only have been something similar to a Thunderbird, if not identical. Interestingly enough, a number of these stories come from the border area between between Texas and Mexico. And I've got a number of cases where people have seen what look like gigantic eagles, again with massive wingspans that far exceed anything that should exist today. I'm talking about wingspans of sort of 17 to 18 feet. In some cases having dark feathers, others brightly coloured feathers. But what's interesting is that many of the areas where people are seeing these Thunderbirds is where we get a lot of these really weird pterodactyl type sightings as well. So I sometimes wonder if there could be a kind of a crossover between the two, that maybe people are mistaking one for the other, or could it possibly be that, against all the odds, there's two sort of flying anomalies in one area. But another case that I investigated from Nevada, this was going back about 6 or 7 years ago, involved a guy who saw what he fully believed was a Thunderbird type animal flying over the skies of the desert itself. So these cases for me are notable because they're incredible, and yet the stories are being told by highly credible people. And so it's a definitive anomaly, but it demonstrates that a lot of these old stories and legends aren't going away anytime soon.
Well, I think we've established that the whereabouts of all the living California condors are well known, and none of them are in Texas. But what about the Thunderbird, the mysterious creature from Native American mythology which still haunts the wilder parts of the desert states today? Or could there be another explanation? What do you think, Mother?
It's a fake. Of course it's a fake.
Yes, of course it was a fake. Mother's completely and utterly correct. It turns out that it was a hoax perpetrated by the local TV news team. The reasons behind the hoax remain obscure and aren't really important. But in this age of fake news, where even people who are supposed to be in charge of us are perpetrating most appalling hoaxes, doesn't it make us want to question the very nature of reality?
Hello?
Charlotte, is it you? We've got a problem.
What's happened?
John's gone all metaphysical on us.
Well, we can't have that. I'll be there right away.
As we always promised, this show is a mixture of hard science
And weird shit.
I really don't know what I'm going to do about that girl, but she's younger than me, better looking than me, and I'm sure she's going to be far more popular with the viewers than I am, so I really haven't got a leg to stand on. But on this occasion at least she happens to be right, except that as the 21st century progresses, the lines between where hard science stops and weird shit begins are getting ever more increasingly blurred. Let's talk about objective reality. We all know what's real, don't we? Except it appears from what I've been reading recently that we don't. So yes, I suppose Charlotte and Karina are right. I am getting all metaphysical on you. But as always, my intentions are good. But we know what is paved with good intentions. Over the last few months I've been reading a lot by Timothy Leary, Robert Anton Wilson, John Higgs and Alan Moore. And between them they've made me question a lot of the things which I'd always taken for granted. Reality tunnel is a term coined by Timothy Leary and further expanded upon by Robert Anton Wilson, who wrote about the idea extensively in his 1983 book Prometheus Rising.
We receive, I think, more than 1 billion signals every minute from the environment. Most of them we're not even conscious of receiving. They affect our legs, our arms, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our chest. All this information is pouring in, and the nervous system is making evaluations at different levels, working its way up. One of the classic models is that we got 3 brains, the reptile brain, the mammal brain, and the human brain. I've heard that for so long. I don't know how far back that goes. I knew that when I was in my 20s, which means back in the early 1950s. If we tried to be conscious of all the signals, we couldn't do it. Because to be conscious of that many signals simultaneously means we only perceive chaos. The chaos is because we can't handle that much information and organize it rapidly. So we throw out all the information that seems unimportant, which means we also throw out all the information that seems threatening to our belief system or to our dogma or to our ideology. We throw out everything we think can be ignored safely, so we concentrate on the things that seem important. Then our brain constructs a model out of all the information coming up from the rest of the nervous system, and we project the model outward and consider it reality. It's not reality, it's our reality tunnel. Everybody else in the same room is constructing a different reality tunnel.
All of us are constantly awash in an unfathomable amount of sensory input. Everything in your field of view, every background sound, the taste of the air, how your body feels, as well as the non-visible parts of the electromagnetic spectrum that bombard us constantly. To exist in the world is to filter all of that information down to just the set of observations that we can manage. No two people given the same set of sensory input will filter them down in exactly the same way. Every individual interprets the same world differently, hence truth is in the eye of the beholder. We have removed most of our sensory experience and then constructed a reality out of what remains. These are our individual reality tunnels. If you take the existence of reality tunnels as your starting point, then I believe that a wide range of Fortean phenomena begin to make a great deal more sense. From the beginnings of recorded history, there have been stories of people who have experienced things which other people standing in the same room or standing right next to them have singularly failed to do. If we take on board the concept of reality tunnels as a given, suddenly this aspect of the universe begins to make a lot more sense. So am I getting all metaphysical on you? Yes, probably. But I, for one, find these concepts fascinating, and I think that they are invaluable tools for those of us who do our best to make sense of the universe around us. But let's go back to the questions I asked you at the beginning of the show. Firstly, who is our mysterious visitor? And second, why is Charlotte dressed as a Viking? This is Lars Thomas. He is a Danish zoologist, and he and I have been friends for well over 20 years now. And he is, amongst other things, the Scandinavian representative of the Centre for Fortean Zoology. He and his family are in England for a few days on holiday, and, as always, they've popped in to see us. And also, as always, I'm putting him to work. And equally as always, I'm coming out with a string of Viking jokes, purely because it amuses me. Denmark is a relatively small country in northern Europe, but it is a very interesting one, because biogeographically it has a unique position. For example, it sticks out into the sea with the Baltic on one side and the North Sea on the other. It's connected to Germany, but at its northern tip it is so close to Sweden it actually acts as a strange land corridor between mainland Europe and Scandinavia. And so, bearing all this in mind, it's really not surprising that there have been so many strange happenings in the zoology of Denmark in the last few years. So, when Lars told us he was going out into the country on a field trip, we asked him to make a video report for us.
This is the Little Vildmose area in northern Denmark. It is a bit of an ironic name because it means the little wild moor, and it is in fact the biggest in Denmark. This is also the area where there's been sightings of golden jackals, of wolves, and it's also the area for the first successful reintroduction of the moose to Denmark in more than 5,000 years. And who knows, it might end up being the moose end up as prey for the wolves. We don't know that as of yet, but there's definitely golden jackals in the area. Several sheep and roe deer has been found killed by the jackal. So far nothing has been attributed to the wolf, but that's probably only a matter of time. The main population of wolves in Denmark is now west of here, southwest of here, near the town of Holstebro.
This report ended up, however, giving us far more questions than it did answers. So, as we knew that he and his family were coming to visit us in October, we saved up the questions until then.
The animals of Denmark have changed a lot in the last few years, haven't they?
Yes, they actually have, because we've been getting a lot of large mammal species coming into Denmark, species that have been lost from the Danish fauna for at least 200, 300 years, and for some of them for at least 5,000 or 6,000 years, perhaps even more. Some of them have just wandered into Denmark by their own steam, and some of them have been deliberately released as a rewilding project.
What kind of species are we talking about?
Well, the ones that have come into Denmark on their own We have first and foremost the wolf. That's been gone from Denmark for about 200 years and has now started to wander back into Denmark, establishing themselves. They've actually bred in Denmark now. There's the golden jackal, which has never been seen in Denmark before. They've started turning up in larger and larger numbers. We have some very weird insects. One of them, a large fly that was actually declared extinct for about 400 years ago and was rediscovered in Spain, I think last year. And now there's been a few mysterious sightings of something that could be that one from the German-Danish border. And then we have various rewilding projects where the Danish authorities and biologists have released large mammal species that used to live in Denmark but have disappeared for a long time ago. There's the beaver, there's the moose, the biggest deer in Europe, there's the European bison, and and there's the wild horse, or in this case actually Exmoor ponies, but wild horses of some kind, and they're all here because the Danish landscape, the Danish nature, needs someone to wreck it every now and then. We need some trees being knocked over and some forest being dug up and bushes ripped apart. It's a good thing for nature if things get kind of turned over and torn down every now and then, because that gives room for much more smaller species, and it gives for a much more interesting and changing and healthy environment.
The European bison was almost extinct at one point, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was only a very small population left in a large forest, Białowieża, in Poland, and they were almost every single one of them was shot during the First World War, and there was a very large breeding effort done in various zoos, and I think some zoos here in Great Britain as well, and they were reintroduced to that same forest and to various other places, and the population is now so large that they've started reintroducing the bison to countries where they used to live. So now we have 3 different, although small, but 3 different populations of bison in Denmark. They are still in very large enclosures. They haven't been allowed to roam entirely free, partly because some people are afraid of them and are afraid they're dangerous, but at the moment it seems that they are very good for the Danish nature.
Tell me about the pond tortoises in Denmark.
Yes, well, that's a bit of an interesting case, because officially the pond tortoise was extinct in Denmark at the end of the Bronze Age, and everybody thought that they weren't anymore. And then I think it was about something like 5 or 10 years ago, and there was a zoologist in Denmark who discovered there was a population of pond tortoises living in a couple of small lakes in western Denmark. And there was a lot of discussion, could this have been a relict population actually surviving in Denmark since the Bronze Age, or was it a population descendants of tortoises that people had kept in aquariums and just put out into the lake when they got tired of them? And there was various DNA analysis done on these tortoises, and some of them seem to point to the fact that they were in fact animals that have survived, a population of animals that have survived in Denmark since the Bronze Age.
Tell me about the wolves in Denmark.
Well, the first wolf that we got back in Denmark was in 2012. It was seen by a group of bird watchers in a bird sanctuary in northwestern Denmark. They were up high in an observation tower, and they saw this dog-like thing from quite a fair distance away. But they took some pictures, and it turned out the animal was so wolf-like that local authorities thought it was worth a closer look. And so some bait was laid out and a couple of camera traps, and I think about 3 months later, the animal was found dead in the area, and it turned out to be an actual wolf. And everybody was quite interested about this and talked about, well, how could the wolf possibly come back to Denmark? And then it turned out within a year or two that this was not a lone wolf, as it were. There were several wolves visiting Denmark, and various camera traps was put up, and a few sheep were killed, and people managed to get some DNA samples from the dead sheep. And it turned out that these wolves were coming from eastern Germany, where they have a fairly large wolf population, and apparently now it's so big that all the young wolves have to wander further and further about for them to find a place to live. And we now have, I think, 6 or 7 adult wolves living in Denmark, and at least one of those pairs have bred. And this year, in 2017, they had at least 5 pups. But it's not all of it is not, kind of happy days and joy and so on, because we have a small but very loud group of anti-wolves people who are convinced that there's no room for wolves in Denmark, who are convinced that they are now in mortal peril every time they go for a walk in the forest, or walking their dog, or they talk about that humans has to be the first priority, and that all the biologists that lives in Copenhagen and all the politicians that are for the wolves, they wouldn't be like that if they actually lived in northwestern Denmark, and as they claim, have to go outside and be in danger every day. They want kindergarten teachers to have guns. They're pretty hysterical actually, because they are so paranoid about it, but they shout a lot, and some politicians actually listen to them. So we don't really know how things are going to go with the wolves in Denmark in the future. Most of us hope for them to stay, so we get a wolf population, but some would rather see all of them shot. And I'm afraid that some idiot with a gun is going to go out and actually try to do that one day.
What species do you think is going to arrive in Denmark next?
Well, the short and truest answer is I haven't got the faintest idea. There's so many things happening, and so many species walking in and turning off from all over the place, that I really couldn't tell. It's probably the next new addition to the Danish animal list is probably going to be an insect. I think there was another one, at least 3 different species of beetles were added to the Danish list just a couple of weeks ago. So it's probably going to be an insect, but if you want to know what larger animal, I think perhaps a large mammal or something like that, I would think perhaps the lynx, or maybe the European wildcat. They would be good to get into our area again, but so many things are happening, so I really couldn't tell you.
There will be more from Lars next month, but in the meantime, let's go over to Ohio, where Colin is waiting for us.
Welcome everyone to Colin Schneider's segment of On the Track, and I'm here with Alex Hawkins, and we're going to talk about a new initiative that the CFZ is putting together, the Next Generation Initiative. It's going to be looking at reaching out to other young cryptozoologists to kind of be a support base, a place in a community where young cryptozoologists can learn and help others, and really get further into the field and help with everything they're doing, learning how to research, learning how to go about doing some certain other things in the field. and I'm really excited to work with Alex and John on this initiative. So Alex is a fairly new face to the CFZ, so I'm going to let her take a minute to talk about who she is, what got her interested, and some of the things she's been working on.
Oh, goodness. So, hi. I've already been introduced. I'm not going to go back into that. But I've been doing this for about 5 or 6 years. Actually, don't have most of my original research because I personally believed it was garbage. So everything's kind of been started from square one in the past year or so. And I'm actually currently working on a paper for... It's an article about the Milton lizard, which was a case from Milton, Kentucky, Canop Creek, of a supposed 15-foot monitor lizard. And, like, not saying anything, not calling anybody out, but I think it's fake.
And that's going to be in Animals and Men, right?
Hopefully, yeah.
Excellent. Anything else?
I think this is a really important project because a lot of us younger researchers kind of get turned away and treated like less in the field because of the quote-unquote lack of experience with how long a lot of people have been in the field. But with my personal belief, it doesn't matter if you've been doing this 5 years or 30. There's still a possibility that you've gotten nothing accomplished. It doesn't have to do with experience, it has to do with passion for what you're doing. So,
I think that part of it is, being young, people don't look at us as really anything but dumb teenagers, and they don't think that we can contribute anything. And getting into this field the way I did, it was something that I did encounter quite a bit, and that's one of the reasons it was my idea to put this together. Alex and I, as well as John, are going to be admins for the group page on Facebook for the NGI, and that should be up sometime soon, as well as having a blog. And to any of the viewers who are younger cryptozoologists, young people that want to get into this field, send me an email or send John an email. Reach out. You can find my email at paranormal10142@gmail.com, and just feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to help in any way I can, and I think that it's really important because something I hear is that we're the next generation, but there's no group or anyone that's really willing to reach out and help us and guide us along and get us to the point where we are researchers and we are really doing good work for the field. So I'm really excited about this, and I'm really excited to be working with Alex and John, and I hope that everyone else at the CFC is as excited as we are about this. Any final remarks?
Not in particular, to be quite honest.
All right. I'll see you guys next month, where I'll be talking about one of my favorite anomalous big cat cases in the past 100 years. So that should be exciting. I'll see you guys next month.
Now over to Karina for our monthly visit to the Watch of the Skies.
I have always felt a curious affinity with this species of bird, probably because for 30 years I was a secretary, and this is a secretary bird. A highly specialised ground-dwelling bird of prey from an older family than the other Old World raptors. It is native to sub-Saharan Africa and is sadly non-migratory, so will never be a natural visitor to these shores. But I think you'd be surprised quite how many completely unexpected avian visitors Britain does have, and that's what this segment of On the Track is all about. Bernard Heuvelmans himself said that cryptozoology wasn't the study of monsters, but the study of unexpected animals, and in the UK what could be more unexpected than vultures, spoonbills and albatrosses? Yes, even the kings of the Southern Ocean have been seen in British waters. 2 species of albatross have been recorded in the UK in recent years. Not all of our feathered visitors are quite so spectacular, but nearly every day there is something exciting to greet the Watcher of the Skies.
Hello! Right, I'm using the hello from me and her, Prudence. Euston, that's a station, an eastern Orphean warbler was spotted on St Agnes in the Scilly Isles during the last days of October. This is a British first for the species. The bird occurs in summer around the Mediterranean through the Balkans via Turkey, the Caucasus and surrounding regions to Central Asia. It is migratory, wintering in sub-Saharan Africa. And here in the UK it has been a bumper breeding season for little terns. This bird is one of the UK's smallest and rarest seabirds, which has battled against the odds to record a remarkable breeding season after fledging more than 600 chicks in 2017. The seabird weighs no more than 55 grams, roughly the same size as a tennis ball and half the weight of a blackbird, and takes part in an epic migration journey every year, flying more than 3,000 miles from West Africa to raise their chicks on our shingle beaches. Pulling my hair here as a hint. Right. During October, the Sun newspaper reported that a rare ghost owl had been spotted in Britain just outside Durham city centre. This was a little owl which had pure white feathers, and although looked like an albino or a leucistic owl, it is thought that it was suffering from a rare genetic condition known as Eno, which makes it look thus. Whilst albinism is a congenital disorder characterised by the complete or partial absence of pigment in the feathers, and leucism is a condition in which there is a partial loss of pigmentation in an animal, resulting in white, pale or patchy coloration of the feathers but not the eyes, birds with the condition known as Eno do not suffer the same eyesight problems.
It's spelled I-N-O, not Ian.
There is still a small amount of melanin left in both the plumage and the eyes, and it would be the sunlight that has rapidly bleached the feathers, causing the bird to appear fully white. Whilst in County Durham, a Eurasian scops owl was spotted, a rare find and a county first. This is a small owl that breeds in southern Europe eastwards into western and central Asia. It is migratory, wintering in southernmost Europe and sub-Saharan Africa. It is rare any distance north of its breeding range, usually occurring as a spring overshoot. The rare sighting of a two-barred warbler took place at the St Aldham's Head area in Dorset in mid-October. This bird is a species of leaf warbler formerly included in the Old World Warbler assemblage. It is closely related to the Greenwich warbler, to which it was formerly considered conspecific. It is found in northern Mongolia, Manchuria and southern Siberia, and this is the 7th recorded sighting of the bird in Britain. A new mannequin from Peru, that's the bird, not the articulated doll by the way, which of course is spelt with an I instead of the second A, which had existed undetected for years, was eventually identified by its unique song back in 1996. The newly discovered mannequin's song lacks undertones and has a one-noted rising vocalization rather than two-noted falling vocalization with undertones, or a falling monosyllabic vocalization with undertones. I don't understand a word of that, so hopefully somebody do. It is only until now, though, that the discovery of the new species and details of the expedition have recently been published. Andy Cratter, a museum ornithology collection manager, said finding the new species and the isolated mountain ridge were important for the scientific community, in part because the discovery spurred Peru to preserve the area. And that's it, folks, for this episode. And now it's over to Jonathan for this episode's look at new and rediscovered species.
Scientists have long recognised 6 living species of great ape aside from humans: Sumatran and Bornean orangutans, eastern and western gorillas, chimpanzees and bonobos. But researchers reporting in Current Biology on November the 2nd have now made it 7, based on a collection of evidence showing that an isolated population of orangutans living in Sumatra is actually its own unique species. They've named the new species the Tapanuli orangutan, Pongo tapanuliensis. Unfortunately, the researchers say there are only about 800 Tapanuli orangutans left. Those that remain are also under threat from loss of lowland habitat and hunting, which makes this newly discovered species amongst the most threatened great ape species in the world. It isn't an everyday event that we find a new species of great ape, so indeed the discovery is very exciting, said Michael Crutzen of the University of Zurich in Switzerland, senior author of the study. In a tiny remote region of Myanmar, scientists have discovered 19 new species of strikingly patterned gecko. These lizards were found in isolated limestone hills and towers known as karst, within a small area of 90 kilometres by 50 kilometres, that's 56 miles by 31 miles, and are most likely restricted to these limestone blocks, the researchers say. I was quite surprised both by the numbers but even more by the close proximity of the species to one another, Lee Grismer of La Sierra University in California, who led the surveys, told Monga Bay. Nothing like this has ever been discovered in this group. The published official count now is 15, and I will submit a paper soon describing another 4. The 15 officially described species include 3 new dwarf geckos from the genus Hemiphilodactylus, reported in the Journal of Natural History. The list also includes 12 new species of bent-toed gecko from the genus Cryptodactylus, described in a study that will soon be published in the Zoological Journal of the Linnaean Society. Finding these geckos wasn't easy. Guided by people from local villages, forest officials and Buddhist monks, Grismer and his team spent several nights searching for geckos in thick, remote karst forests and dark limestone caves. The petite praslin caecilian, Hypogeophis pitti, is the world's newest and possibly the smallest caecilian. Scientists discovered the animal on the island of Praslin in the Seychelles, an archipelago in the Indian Ocean. The new species is the 7th caecilian species found in the Seychelles, where the animals have been evolving for 64 million years.
And in this new segment, we are going to be looking back at other episodes and things that we filmed in them and give you some updates.
A couple of episodes ago, we talked about some chickens that we rescued. Now it's time we go check up on them.
So, these are our 5 rescued chickens, ex-battery hens, poor little ladies, but they've all come along. We had to segregate these 2 from those 3. One of the 3 in there, picking on one of those 2. So we thought, well, we'd better segregate one. Segregate the bully from the bully. But instead of leaving her on her own, we put another one in there with her. Those 2 have come on really well. They're all covered in feathers. And they're all very jolly.
If you remember last month, we talked about the Javan tiger. Well, there's been some new development.
The other week, Max, who it must be said was never particularly impressed with the picture purporting to be of a Javan tiger, which arrived on our screens in October, sent me this story from Monga Bay, in which Indonesian zoologists pour cold water on the idea that the Javan tiger has survived. We used 3 methods to analyse the image, namely measurement, skin pattern and feeding behaviour. Gono Sembladi, a mammal expert with the Indonesia Institute of Sciences, told Monga Bay on September the 28th. The big cat seen in the photo, captured after feeding, has body proportions consistent more with a Javan leopard than a Javan tiger, he said. In addition, the pattern on its body, though grainy in the photograph, does appear to show dots rather than stripes. Our old friend Scotty Westfall, who writes under the name Retriever Man, also pointed out that Javan leopards are amazing things in their own right. Because they're an insular dwarf and because of their deep genetic divergence between them and mainland leopards, they could almost be thought of as their own species. That's something I truly didn't know. Thanks, Scotty. We don't have anywhere near as many animals as we used to, mostly because we don't have as many staff as we used to. But we do still have animals, and here's Graham with a roundup of what's been happening with them.
The Reeves pheasant died early in November, having been with us around 10 years. He was territorial right to the end, and when I went in the enclosure to feed him and the pigeons, I took a broom with me to ward him off when necessary. The pigeons didn't seem to register on his radar, however. There were no pecking order disputes. His occasional noises reminded me of a wheelbarrow with a squeaky wheel.
He was a bad-tempered old bugger, but I think we're going to miss him a lot.
Now the weather's getting colder. The axolotls are going to be shifted indoors. Ooh, I think we have capture. No, it'll have to be overhead. That's...
The natural habitat of these neotenic amphibians are the cold volcanic lakes of Mexico. And whilst they probably would survive a winter in Woolsbury, I'd rather not put it to the test.
But before we go, there's this.
Ever since we restarted this show back in the summer, we've been telling you how Louis was going to set up a Patreon campaign. Well, he's done it, and you can come, see what he's done, and hopefully support us in a very real way at this address. Thank you, guys.
And this.
And in next month's episode.
This next story actually happened because of my dad.
Back in June, my friend Wendy posted something on Facebook about some remains in her garden. So I thought we'd better phone the CFZ.
Okay, rolling.
As always, thank you for checking in on this episode of On the Track, and we hope you tune in for the next episode. Goodbye!
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of another episode. Thank you for watching. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. I'd like to say a big thank you not only to the people who've helped with this episode, but to the people all around the world who've supported the CFZ over the last month. Thanks, guys. We truly couldn't manage without you. We'll be back in another month with an excessively peculiar Yuletide episode. So, until then, be seeing you.